Hi, I'm Dr. Penxian Qian. Standing next to me is the first author of the paper, Dr. Mu Qian. He will give you a summary on his paper titled Concomitant SK Current Activation and Sodium Current Inhibition Cause J-wave syndrome. The mechanism of J-wave syndrome are incompletely understood. We hypothesize that concomitant activation of apamine-sensitive small conductance calcium-activated potassium current, or IKAS, and the inhibition of sodium current by SIPA recapitulate the phenotypes of J-wave syndrome in Langendorf perfused rabbit hearts. The study was performed by Dr. Mu Qian, and he will be reporting and explaining his slides to you.
Pseudo-ECG data in Figure 1 shows that SIPA induces J-wave elevation and spontaneous ventricular fibrillation in most hearts. Subsequent IKAS blockade by apamine attenuated J-waves and eliminated spontaneous ventricular fibrillation. Thus, in normal rabbit hearts, we recapitulated J-wave syndrome phenotypes by SIPA. Excessive IKAS activation is highly pro-arrhythmic, while IKAS blockade is anti-arrhythmic. Optical mapping data in Figure 2a shows that SIPA heterogeneously shortens APD, while subsequent apamine prolonged APD reduced APD heterogeneity and restored the phase 2 plateau of repolarization. The delta APD map in panel B further strengthened the heterogeneous APD shortening after SIPA and the heterogeneous APD prolongation after apamine. Figure 3 shows that SIPA increases action potential dynamic instabilities. As shown in the panel A, after SIPA, action potential exhibited increased dispersion with steep APD gradients, which changed dynamically from beat to beat. The spatial heterogeneity and the temporal instabilities of action potential were attenuated by subsequent exposure to apamine. These results indicate that IKAS activation is spatial-temporally heterogeneous. The steep APD gradient increased action potential dispersion and the dynamic variation suggest heightened arrhythmogenicities with IKAS activation. Figure 4 shows the effects of SIPA on depolarization, conduction, and calcium transit. Panel A and B show that SIPA significantly decelerated action potential upstroke and slowed intraventricular conduction velocity. Panel C and D show that SIPA inhibited sodium current in rapid ventricular myocyte. Panel E and F show that SIPA significantly abbreviated calcium transit duration, while apamine prolonged calcium transit duration. Figure 5 shows the arrhythmogenic effects of SIPA. We optically captured spontaneous ventricular fibrillation occurred after SIPA. As shown in the panel A, J point was elevated during sinus rhythm before the ventricular fibrillation onset. 2 episodes of spontaneous ventricular fibrillation subsequently initiated from spontaneous short-coupled premature ventricular contractions, which were confirmed in the corresponding voltage traces in panel B, which showing a phase 2 reentry. The voltage map of beat 1 in panel C exhibited an extremely steep APD gradient, providing an enhanced arrhythmogenicity prior to the onset of the spontaneous ventricular fibrillation. The phase map of beat 3 in panel D shows wave breaks that degenerated into reentry in the right ventricles. Figure 6 shows that in addition to IKAS blockade, isoproterenol could be another therapeutic approach for SIPA-induced J-wave syndrome. As shown in the panel A, spontaneous ventricular fibrillation after SIPA developed shock-resistant fashion. After isoproterenol, no spontaneous ventricular fibrillation developed. Panel C shows optical traces at the time of defibrillation. During SIPA, the shock-resistant ventricular fibrillation on ECG was actually successfully defibrillated. However, phase 2 reentry was immediately reinitiated after only one sinus beat, such that ventricular fibrillation sustained on the ECG. After isoproterenol, the pacing-induced ventricular fibrillation was successfully defibrillated without reinitiation. These results indicate that isoproterenol is antiarrhythmic in SAIPA-induced J-wave syndrome. Figure 7 shows that IKAS activation induces Osborn waves and phase 2 repolarization alternance during hypothermia. Panel A and B show that Osborn waves and spontaneous ventricular fibrillation were induced by hypothermia and were attenuated by subsequent apamine. Optical mapping data in panel C shows that IKAS blockade by apamine prolonged APD during hypothermia. Panel D shows that hypothermia induces negative calcium voltage coupling at distal sites, which was eliminated by apamine. Thus, IKAS is activated during hypothermia and participates in the generation of Osborn waves.
In summary, simultaneous inhibition of sodium current and activation of the IKAS creates a rapid model of J-wave syndrome. Apamine, a specific IKAS blocker, suppresses the J-wave induced by hypothermia. These findings suggest that IKAS activation contributes to the development of J-wave syndrome in rabbit ventricles. It is possible that IKAS activation also plays a role in J-wave syndrome of human patients.